Thank you so much for your wonderful perspective. And as I was talking, that let us also discuss some of the questions that cropped up during the course of our discussion within ourselves. So I just like to ask one thing, that is the recently concluded UN Biodiversity Conference has taken a significant step towards safeguarding global biodiversity by adopting a finance roadmap that extends until 2030. Can you elaborate on the progress of the biodiversity negotiations?
Yes, as I had mentioned earlier, the you know agreement that was achieved was about $30 billion commitment in contributions from wealthier nations to support the developing countries, right? They have also committed to mobilize 200 billion dollars annually every year dedicated to biodiversity conservation for restoration and other works, related works, and for achieving the 30 by 30 target. And the 30 by 30 target, of course, is to ensure that 30% of all marine areas and 30% of all terrestrial areas, that means 30% of all land and 30% of all sea on the planet, are protected by the year 2030 to ensure that biodiversity gets a chance to uh, re-establish themselves in areas that were lost. So this is the most important financial mechanism. But one thing I like to mention here is that finance has always been the most contentious issue, even in the biodiversity negotiations, because for these funding shortfalls are the reason why we are not able to achieve the Aichi biodiversity targets, which are set about 10 years back, and then none of the countries are able to achieve those. So now that we have something called the Global Biodiversity Framework, which actually sets out a very detailed roadmap on how we should go about all the countries, what to do, where to do, when to do. But the finances are still the problem. Thankfully, a beginning has been made. So 30% of 200 billion is what, like 15%? But we still need to ensure the rest of the 85% that has been assessed by various organizations to be the minimum amount that is required to ensure that biodiversity gets a chance, degraded areas are restored, and that indigenous communities uh, who still control about 80% of the world's biodiversity in just 22% of the land surface that they, kind of occupy. They get a chance to actually continue protecting, continue living the same life that they have always lived, that their development aspirations are met within what they have, grown up, and they get the modern facilities within their own respective areas and communities. To ensure all of this, we need finances, and basically, these agreement that we have achieved is that okay, developing countries will get the money, like a seed money of $30 billion to kickstart all these activities.
Thank you. Let us talk about the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. What are the challenges for the conservation of biodiversity and restoration of biodiversity in this region?
The Hindu Kush Himalayas are an extensive region, as you all know, from extending from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, Nepal, all the way to China, and we have so many different, uh, you know, communities living here as well. Uh, this area is also known as the third pole, right? Or the Asian water towers, and about 40% of humanity are dependent on this region. And one of the biggest challenges that is happening here is that this region is warming, uh, at least 3 times as fast as the rest of the world, right? This area region has uh, the third most amount of ice locked in after the two poles. So, firstly, when it becomes warmer, we see accelerated melting of not just the glaciers of the the mountain snow, all of it. And recently there was a report about the loss of snow cover. All of that creates problems for people and biodiversity that have adapted to these cold, snow-covered climates. So that is creating a lot of problem as we see more melting. There's more runoff of water, and that causes entire communities to be displaced. Not just human communities, but the biodiversity that lives there as well. There's a lot of megafauna that lives here. There are 300 important bird areas. There are 10 global biodiversity hotspots spread out across the Hindu Kush Himalayan mountains, extending from Arunachal Pradesh within India, Arunachal Pradesh to Jammu and Kashmir. So all of these areas are facing the challenge of biodiversity conservation in different ways, and these are evolving. I'd like to give you an example. A few years ago, there was this WWF study in Nepal, which kind of projected that the few rhinos that still live in Nepal are slowly going to be migrating south and into India, and Nepal will lose all their rhino population. And the reason was that the grassland was shifting as it was becoming warmer, right? So that was a interesting study, because from the perspective of Nepal, they were going to lose a species, whereas in India we are going to see an increase in rhino population. Similarly, we are also seeing that one of the biggest drivers of human wildlife conflicts in the region is warming. There have been numerous studies to establish that there is a proliferation of invasive species of vegetation across different kinds of habitat because of warming, because of rainfall changes as well. And that is causing, you know, megafauna who are dependent on all this vegetation to migrate into human settlements, feed on food crops, or enter villages. And especially with elephants, we are seeing an increased conflict, increased intensity and frequency of conflict all across the landscape, as well as we are also seeing other megafauna uh, entering into areas of human habitation leading to conflict. So there are a lot of problems, and these are just megafauna we are looking at. The most important, I think, field of study where we have a research gap in this area is with the insects. We don't have a baseline data to understand how many insects are, what is the insect mass which can be compared from the past to present, and how many insects we are losing, what is the status of our pollinators. We don't have. We just know that, okay, the numbers of these insects are decreasing. One of the indicators is that number of insect-eating birds are decreasing across the landscape. So these are a lot of challenges that we are seeing. I think one of the main challenges is the research gap across this region.
Now, just to follow up to this question, this is my personal question. I'm just curious to know your perspective. Like as we are talking about this Hindu Kush region, one important point event happened in way back in 2010. I think this is the formation of the Atabat Lake. I think it is also called the Gojal Lake. It happened because of the massive landslide, and people are blaming it on the sometimes on the Karakoram highway building that has changed the geomorphological position out there. And as you are talking about the biodiversity issue, the Hamza region where it is located, there people are living. I think the maximum number of the septuagenarian people are within the Hamza region because they are living in consonance with the nature. With the water flowing through the silicon hydride that is giving the longevity, and they do not use any medicine, but they live long. So, in that context, that this kind of thing, this Atabat Lake, do you think this is an ecological time bomb in the sense that this is a lake now? This has become some kind of tourist spot. Everybody is flocking out there, but this is a trapped water. And moreover, this water must be arresting a lot of sunlight, and it is also creating some kind of as you are saying, the temperature is increasing. What is your perspective on that issue?
There have been numerous studies. There are over 9,000 glacial lakes that are growing across the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And all of these glacial lake outflow formations, GLOFs, are a threat to people living downstream to villages. And we have seen such disasters happening in the past, not only in India, but also in neighboring countries, in Bhutan, in Nepal. But the most famous incident is, of course, 2013 Uttarakhand, when a glacial lake outburst washed away entire villages downstream. So that is, as you rightly mentioned, it's a sitting time bomb, and the glacial, restoration through technological interventions is, something that the Healthy Climate Initiative would like to explore and ensure that there is enough research to stop the loss of glaciers, especially albedo enhancement techniques that are being tested. Recently, I think Chota Chigri Glacier is where Healthy Climate Initiative, along with IIT Indore and a professor from University of Stanford, did some albedo enhancement. And then we have, of course, the great example of an indigenous uh, ice stupa techniques by Sonam Wangchuk and his team in Ladakh, which also has helped in restoring or rather building artificial glaciers to address these problems. Uh, so there are numerous studies. We know you're sitting on a time bomb, but the human impacts are sometimes ignored, I would say. When we talk about the loss of ice cover, we talk about how much glacier they lost. There are a lot of human lives which are on the, uh, you know, on the pipeline here who are being threatened because of these events, and that is what we need to focus on. We really need to act very fast because we do not want another disaster where a glacial lake outburst could wash away entire villages once again.
Thank you so much. So well said. And finally, I'd like to ask you, what can we learn from the indigenous communities around the world?
Well, as we have said, the IPBES, back in 2017 or 18, when they published this report that indigenous communities around the world, despite living on 22% of the land, actually protect the 80% of the biodiversity and maybe 70% of the remaining natural places on Earth. Since then, we have a lot of interest in learning from how indigenous communities live, sustainably with nature. Very interesting. Last year in December, the IPBES actually published a report called the Nexus report, and it looked at all the different agreements, the Paris agreements, the SDGs, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and all of them seem to have a convergence of idea now that we need to go back to indigenous knowledge systems. So it is not reinventing the wheel. We just need to relearn how our ancestors used to live, right? I mean, 100 years back, 80 years back, nobody was eating anything from a plastic packet, right? And that is the entire history of humans. If you go back 10,000 years, all these years, people were mostly sustainable, mostly, living in consonance with nature. But, what has changed in the last 100 years is that we have become habituated to uh, products that are basically uh, exploitative extraction from the earth, and at the same time, we are also treating everything, the land, the water, the air, as our dustbins. So we need to stop that. In indigenous communities, we do not have that. We see that the indigenous people are always still living very sustainably with nature. So we need to relearn. I think that's the basic way. Go back to how our forefathers lived.
Thank you, Mr. Phukan, for your insightful and a very passionate deliberation. So let's now move into a brief discussion to explore some key questions further. Can we open the forum for all the questions? Can we see what are the questions are there in the chat box? Okay, one question came. Why would people care about biodiversity? What is at stake? What can people do to mitigate? It is the questions to the both speakers. So let's begin with Madam Gabriel, followed by Mr. Phukan.
What is at stake? You are at stake. Your family is at stake. Our communities are at stake. And our planet Earth is at stake. So I know it's a very broad question, but what is at stake? I mean, 1.5 is what we were trying to curb the temperature at, but we all know data and science and it's all been documented. We are going way beyond that. Sea level rise is increasing. There is more destruction. There is more modernization, consumption, and infrastructure developments. So that puts us all at high stakes. I mean, this is what is at stake. And if that happens, the world, the planet gets destroyed. And as you can see in many places, you have more disasters. You have more, like Rituraj said, more glaciers coming down and melting of ice. You have more loss of marine biodiversity and wildlife biodiversity, plants. Every aspect of our ecological system is at stake. And if you feel that you're just a drop in the ocean, believe me, every little act that you take, even if you're alone, walk the path alone. And if you feel, you can contact your immediate community leaders, municipalities, and then go beyond to state, district, and then go, national and global. But if you feel you can do something to help curb what is at stake, it will be fabulous to take action wherever you are.
Yes, this question was from Shomitra. And Mr. Rituraj, please respond.
Yeah, I would just like to add to Elsie. First of all, biodiversity is not just wild animals. Biodiversity is everything that we depend on. It ensures food security because, as you know, 40% of our plants and vegetables are still pollinated by uh, pollinators like bees. And the loss of pollinators is already causing the loss of crops, especially fruits and vegetables in many parts of the world. That is well documented. A lot of our medicines are derived from the biodiversity. So our health is also compromised with biodiversity loss. Uh, Thirdly, Elsie, I would like also to point out to the marine dead zones that have been discovered, around the world because of, loss of oxygen. Many parts of the oceans are now devoid of fishes and other marine life. And fishermen who were dependent on these areas are also facing the issue of food security now. So I think a lot is at stake. The very survival of entire human communities are at stake here. We are talking about food security. We are talking about, food, hunger drives everything. We are talking about civil war situations in the future when people are, unable to find food for themselves. We are looking at migrations. We are looking at conflict. We are looking at the, so food security, health security, uh, just peace, everything is at stake.
Yes, there are follow-up questions to that. What, why, how of Montreal Protocol? And also, what are we doing to mitigate the risk?
Sorry, what was the question? Can you repeat, please?
Hey, actually, there's a follow-up to that questions by Shomita Das. I'm just reading it is written out there. What, why, how of Montreal Protocol? I mean that Montreal and Kunming and Montreal protocol was there. Same thing. Further elaborations on that specific point.
Okay, so I'll just, Elsie, if you don't mind, I'll briefly answer
Yes,
that.
go
I
ahead.
think.
All yours. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
So
this is really.
The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which is in short, is was known as the Paris Agreement for Biodiversity, and it was, you know, it has four global goals basically and 23 targets, and the main was to scale up the protection of marine areas, which is currently at about 10%, and terrestrial areas, which is about 17%. Both of these to 30% by 2030. So this is the 30-30 target that the Kunming Montreal. It has many other what you call areas of how to operationalize and all that. But basically, this is the crux of the Kunming-Montreal biodiversity framework.
And next question is, what are we doing to mitigate the risk? Those are questions to both of you. Well, let's
What are
begin
we
with
doing to mitigate the?
risk. The problem that we are
It
facing
is.
today. What are we doing right now to mitigate this problem, the environmental, this disaster that is looming ahead? What are we doing basically? This is a broad question, and let's begin with Madam Gabriel. Then you can add additional points, if you please.
Okay. We from the Ocean School India and Young Environmentalists are using and focusing the outline agenda for the Ocean Decade number 10, which is saying enforcement of knowledge, exchange of data, science-based facts, and ocean literacy. That's what we're doing to educate because knowledge is key. And, we're living at the top percentage of the community here in India. We are privileged to be knowledgeable and have exchange programs and participate and be trained. We're really privileged. But if we can educate the rest of our societies and our communities in these marine as well as forest biodiversity areas, I think we will mitigate the risk. And knowledge is key. And we work on ocean literacy, like I had outlined on the modules. And with this key information, I think there's been a lot of positivity. I'd also like to dwell on that there is knowledge awareness spreading. There are fishermen willing to go on for sustainable fishing. There are schools becoming eco-friendly. There are resorts going on to sustainable certification. I mean, they are willing to cut down the risk. And this is how all areas of life are moving forward, slow. It is really slow but steady. But I'd also like to add, having said that we're running out of time. We're in 2025 May. We have 4.5 years to reach 2030 goal. Just 4.5 years. And we need to work harder, faster. We need more people to be ignited and to join the forces. So I ask of all of you here in the audience today, which is such a privilege to attend this webinar, that when you finish this webinar, go out and really do your bit, join the forces of NGOs and your area of expertise, right, in your own backyard first, and then move on further to help mitigate these risks.
Thank you. Thank you, son. Mr. Rituraj.
Well, I think that the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that are locked in the atmosphere are going to continuously drive up temperatures for a long time. Are continuously going to melt ice in the polar regions, causing sea level rise to continue for many years, and that is the AR6 from the IPCC, right? So we know that. Now, what we are talking about is decarbonization. We are talking about lifestyle changes, policy changes that would perhaps best address, make it a more equitable world, make it more environment friendly. Without a doubt, we must do all of this. But I feel The time to keep global warming to 1.5 degree from the pre-industrial levels is really is almost gone. We need to buy time by using technological interventions. People do not want to talk about the possibility of nature-inspired technological interventions. Perhaps we could, there is marine cloud brightening inspired by, some natural events like volcanic eruptions. Perhaps we have to explore these kind of technological interventions to save lives and at the same time buy time so that the world can move on with decarbonization, transform the economies from the fossil fuel addiction, which is still continuing. And then, finally, we will be able to save humanity. Yes, we can refer to another Montreal Protocol on the ozone depletion products that was signed a long time back. But unfortunately, if the Paris Agreement had managed to achieve that, that should have happened in the past decade since the Paris Agreement was signed from 2015 to 2025 now. But nothing has changed. We have not been able to, species extinction rate has increased, emissions have increased, everything is going on. Everything is going on. We are building, India is the only country in the G20 to have stick to the commitments made under the Paris Agreement, but at the same time, we are also increasing coal mines. So we are kind of, everybody is doing everything. So that is still pushing us to the precipice. I think we need to look at climate interventions without a doubt.
Yes, it's a really age-old question that whether the economy or the ecology we should take the should be the priority for our nation. And but having said this thing, I think that we must share the success stories. In your place also in Kaziranga, it's a success story to some extent, I'm sure. And Lake in Aravalli Hills, these are success stories in India, and also in near Isha Foundation, they have also done a lot of plantations, and I'm sure that is a success story. These kinds of success story, I think, will inspire people. And I would also like to ask Madam Gabriel that if she can share some brilliant success stories in India that can be the hope for the future. Would you, Madam Gabriel, some success stories?
Yes, yes. In fact, the COVID years were the best years for ocean, and ocean literacy. Developed most of my modules during the COVID years of 20 and 21, 22. In fact, it started at the end of 2019. And I must share with you that the whole of India was under COVID restrictions. And the only place, like Rituraj said about his indigenous village, I would like to share that Lakshadweep was the only green zone. I mean, the only set of islands habitable, 30 islands out of that, there are 11 which are habitable, all were green zone. No COVID, no, infections, and absolutely that was a time where I contacted all the islanders from these 11 islands and the youth and got them to do ocean cleanups. And it was fabulous because they could come out into the open. They could get the community to sit and discuss the ocean, disasters, the risks, share their stories. Fishermen shared their stories. And communities of all age groups came out and did the ocean cleaning in 11 islands. So that's one story I'd like to share, which was a very big success story. Means the rest of India was locked in, complaining and wondering what had we done to ourselves. But here was the Lakshadweep Islands, absolutely brilliant, working in silence, walking the talk literally, and using these months of isolation for saving our biodiversity. And that was their own backyard, their own islands, and little islands and community education. So that's one success story, beautiful, absolutely. And another success story I would like to say is more and more of our students from class 12 here in high school, after finishing, a very good rise, only 20% rise, but that's very big for us because education is expensive, further education in specialization in marine biology and oceanography. and fisheries and everything. But 20% rise and increase has happened since last year and this year, where more of our students have joined universities in Great Barrier Reef, Cook Universities, San Diego, Los Angeles, and represented India on the global map. So there's a 20% rise. We're looking at more rise in amongst our target audience and how we can ignite them. And another success story is that I don't know the alpha generation and the next Z
Gen Z.
generation. Yeah, Gen Z, they're especially the alpha group. They're really, really receptive to stories of indigenous wisdom. Or I tell them about me coming from a small village in West Bengal, and where we did eat out of leaves, and I belong to an era where we did have fruit trees and vegetables, and it was a pleasure to pick them up, and we did set food and ate out of earthen pots. And I always tell them, you don't have to do it, but I'm so happy that you're so receptive to hear those generational stories. And they get very ignited, and of these, insights. And so that's a success story, that the youth are receptive to listening about how the biodiversity was really almost intact when we were young like them. And that gives us at our age more motivation to take this forward, because they're so receptive and open to bridging that gap. So that's another success story that we see on the global map. So it's fabulous there.
Really, I fully say eye to eye with you, especially in the context of Lakshadweep, which I've personally experienced. It's the only place in the world where you can see what they call the sex in the sea, in the sense the greenish tinge when the coral reefs are naturally germinating. You can see that thing. But having said this, I have just one question that you really important importance on the education. I'm just trying to understand what kind of education. In the sense, is the educated people have done the maximum harm, especially in the canes, as you talked about the Great Barrier Reef, actually. So they are using what you call the body lotion and the creams, and especially the women folk, I should say, that oxybenzone and all those things, which are the or many other things that homo salate or many other ingredients are there. These are deadly and harmful for the reef. So why the educated people are using this thing? Is it the education sufficient, or we need some kind of spiritual dimension so that although we say so many things, but we do not stop using body creams and lotions and something, and we dive in the sea, enjoy the sea, and we cause the harm. I wanted both of your perspective. Isn't that all right?
You won't believe it. In India, wherever we dive, at Kerala, Goa, as well as Pondicherry and Chennai and Havelock Islands, Andaman Islands, Nicobar, as well as Lakshadweep Islands, are Indian. I mean, I'm very proud to say this out in the international conferences always, that I don't know about the rest of the global South and Asia, but in India, we don't use sunscreen. We don't use synthetic materials, and we don't have as divers, we are we are really, really taking efforts to make sure to keep our ancestral and our generational knowledge intact by not getting modernized in, polluting the ocean. So I think Indian coastal areas, as well as our islands, are taking really good lead. And we have data to certify that our Indian divers, as well as our tourists as well, are not so much into synthetic materials as well as sunscreens, like you said. But having said that, we also want cross exchange of data knowledge. So we joined the Great Barrier Reef Ocean Program, and we are affiliated to them to learn what do they do. How do they educate their international tourists who are coming in drones and millions to the Great Barrier Reef? How do they educate their tourists and people around the coastal areas? And they also bring in their indigenous communities on board to share knowledge and to educate more teachers and community leaders. So That's from an educational point of view. We have joined them as well as many other ocean communities globally, wherever I am teaching ocean literacy. We just finished classes in the Philippines, as well as Jamaica in the Caribbean, and quite a few, Sri Lanka as well. Sri Lanka also is quite cautious and again, very indigenous in nature. And simplicity is the key that our global south brings to the globe. Simplicity and authenticity, as well as retaining what our ancestors and our forefathers gave us. I think we're still strong in spirit as Indians, and I'm very proud of that. And I keep repeating this story on whenever I go internationally or we have a digital exchange. That we should still curb that consumerism as well as plastic pollution in the ocean, and we should still keep leading on a positive note, that is.
Madam, actually, have you experienced that one of the most disturbing ecological signal that we are experiencing in the ocean environment is that deep sea creatures are really coming up. I mean, they are found near the ocean surface actually, and they are sometimes been washing with many other airy creatures never seen before. Actually, they are coming up because of ocean acidification, the lack of oxygen, and many of the chemicals and war and many other things. And they say in the submarine and underwater, those activities by sonar and all those things also pushing them above, as well as the ocean acidity. What's your experience on this issue?
Yes. You're absolutely on point. It is global warming of the ocean, as well as sea level rise and pollution, which collects at the bottom. And sometimes there are plastics which cannot be seen by the naked eye. These are microplastics. And they come up looking for food, and then they see these plastics floating. And that's how, because of the global warming, the heating, the water is heating. And basically, the ocean is one. So if there's an oil spill in Africa or the Atlantic, it is bound to affect and come towards all parts of the ocean. All the five oceans are connected. So wherever there's an oil spill, everything gets affected, even Lakshadweep and Havelock and the Great Barrier Reef. If there's a volcano or an earthquake or a tsunami somewhere else, everything else gets connected. Therefore, we need to rise together. So as a deep sea diver, I think the ocean is a beautiful place which gives us, it takes me on a spiritual ecology journey, but it also brings a lot of heartaches and heartbreaks to see that, when you see fish strangled in ghost nests and, turtles as well as plastic cover bottle caps stuck in the marine reefs, and so much of ecological damage under the ocean. You can see firsthand. And the students also who dive with me see that firsthand. And they are bound, at least 8 out of 10 of them definitely join marine biology and oceanography or the ocean studies and research and take it to the next level. So it's your first-hand experience with the ocean, which really helps to study that and take that forward. But yes, you're right. In the end, it is the nature which suffers, and here the marine biodiversity which suffers, and it is us who are polluting, and just not plastic pollution. There is sewage going in, there is construction debris going in, there is postal infrastructure going in, there is EIAs being passed without certification and entire long inspection and stringent bylaws being overlooked. So we need to see that there are various areas from all over the world which affect all the oceans simultaneously. Whatever damage is being done in the Pacific affects the Indian Ocean and vice versa. So it's the global damage is being done unanimous.
You're really absolutely on the point, hitting the bullseye in the sense. I personally also experientially feel the same thing that even whales are losing their marine highway because of the amok changes. It's a very well-known phenomenon. Mr. Rituraj was telling that 1.5 degrees is the remote dream right now. It is already 1.6, and within 23 years we are going to reach that 2 degree maybe, and it's an alarming sign for the whole world. Actually, we do not know. It's really a big damage, and people will die in millions, if not in billions. I mean, this is the kind of situation we are in. But I think nobody is waking up to this thing. But are you actually, from your education standpoint, they say that China has been doing it quite a lot, eDNA, AI, remote sensing, and many other things. And also they are using the robots. They have got a 100 billion trees plantation program out of the 70 billion they have already done using the robots and many other things. Any thought process in your education program on this issue?
Yes,
And
it's on a good note. There is at least a 30% rise, I think, with a little funding coming in now. There's 30% rise in more research in ocean pollution mitigation. There's more research on, helping researchers, young researchers, to carry on their work of study into saving the ocean biodiversity. So I think more universities are coming up, more organizations are coming up in the ocean biodiversity fields, and people are more aggressively working. I'm not saying that the world is not working. Oh, you do have ships, vessels, huge vessels in the Pacific who are just out to collect ocean plastics. You do have New Zealand nets, cordoning areas as sieves so that pollution doesn't go into these oceanic areas. You do have innovations, being taken as lead by surfers, by divers. We do have many divers for climate in Australia. Like I just had interaction with them last year, and that they're diving for not only debris, but they're also diving for climate change. So we have surfers, divers, citizen scientists, as well as more emerging, younger scientific community for the oceans coming up. So on a good note, there's been a 30% rise, definitely.
oh, wonderful. Mr. Rituraj, your perspectives, please. Of course, we have discussed so many questions.
Well, I think a lot of good things are happening, and today on Biodiversity Day, we must, talk about two examples that India has set for the world. One is, of course, Project Tiger, which is tremendous success, which is probably unprecedented,
Right.
which started back in 1973. So we were way ahead of the rest of the world, and uh, we must take leadership in biodiversity conservation as well as climate change and the convergence of ideas that is required now. Second is, of course, the examples you talked about earlier. I think that there is not a greater example than the resurgence of rhinos in Kaziranga National Park in Assam. It's the world's greatest conservation success story. Uh, just wanted to mention these two, and I think we are seriously running out of time. And
Yes, yes, the
yeah,
question is.
I agree. Like Elsie has mentioned, there are so many good things happening. But having said that, I would definitely reiterate that the time for just people action is not enough because our politicians are being, they are acting as agents of corporate houses of oil companies and other fossil fuel companies, and they will continue to do so. So we do not have governments that represent the people or they represent the interest of the planet. So in many ways we are doomed, and that is not going to see not going to change very soon. You see the amount of wars that are going on. What is the carbon footprint of a missile or a fighter jet, or how much of emissions are being added in Israel, in Gaza, in all those rush by Russia and Ukraine in terms of the war? Nobody will talk about that, right? So the other alternative is to explore the technological interventions that are possible. We need to at least spend some research and development resources into these areas so that we can if the need comes for saving human lives in the future, and we need to turn back the clock on, trying to get the Earth back to 1.5, then probably those are the areas we need to look into as well. You can plant a lot of trees. I mean, tree plantation is fantastic because it restores biodiversity, it ensures food security, it brings back native biodiversity, all and so many other positives. Takes out air pollution, but it cannot take out all the carbon pollution from the atmosphere. I mean, that is wrong to think that trees could solve the problem of methane accumulation or carbon dioxide accumulation. No, it is not enough. So we need to think beyond that. Thank you.
I fully see eye to eye with you in this respect. I think that we are running out of time. So as we come to the end of the enlightening session, allow me to briefly reflect on what we have learned today. And our speakers have reminded us that biodiversity is the foundation of life, from coral reefs in Lakshadweep to icy terrains in the polar expeditions. So we have learned how youth engagement, indigenous wisdom, and strategic negotiation are all part of same puzzle, securing a sustainable future for all. So let us take this day as a renewed call for action. We must work together across sectors, across borders to protect what gives us life. As individuals, educators, policymakers, or simply citizens, we all have a role in nurturing our ecosystems. I extend my heartfelt thanks to our speakers, Elsie, Gabriel, and Rituraj Phukan, for their inspiring contribution and enlightening speech. And I thank you, dear audience, for your active participation and curiosity. Let's continue this journey towards harmony with nature, not just in words, but in our daily actions. Have a wonderful day ahead and happy International Day for Biological Diversity. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.